funding stages in case of a startup enterprise or a startup venture. So the first stage in case of a startup for the funding is known as seed funding. And at this stage, mainly by friends and relatives or angel investor up to about 20% of equity. So the first stage of funding is where the friends and relatives and some angel investor will chip in with the capital, and that is your सीड फंडिंग. सो व्हेन यू आर जस्ट सीड यानी कि जब बीज बो रहे हो तो वो बीज के लिए आपको जो पैसा देता है दैट इज नॉन एज सीड फंडिंग. The second round is known as round A funding. Now, in case of round A funding, what happens at this stage? Venture capital gets involved, used to establish a product in the market and take business to the next level, or to make up the shortfall of the startup not yet being profitable. So at the second stage, that is round A funding, what you have generally is entry of venture capital fund, and who would do the funding beyond the funding done by an angel investor or by the friends and relatives, so as to take the venture of the startup to a next level, if not to next level, and maybe make it profitable. Then you have round B funding, and that is the third stage of funding, round B funding. And what happens here in case of round B funding? Startup is established and need funds for expansion of activities, markets, and acquisition. And that is where round B funding happens, and that's where you have the entry of the private equity. Then you have stage 4, and that is debt funding. And in case of debt funding, what you have, startup is well established and capable of servicing debt. So now that the startup has started making profit, it is EBITDA positive. That means it perhaps has the capability of being able to fund the debt or the service the debt that it would take. And therefore, at the stage 4, it goes for the debt funding and borrow money for the purpose of expansion of its activities. And in case of startup funding, we also hear of something which is known as mezzanine financing or the bridge loan. So what is a mezzanine financing or bridge loan? And that is, many times a particular lender or a particular private equity has already agreed and committed to lend you money or give you equity at agreed terms, but that process might take time of 3-4 months, and the startup may need money urgently in between, and therefore what it does, it approaches some lenders who would do the bridge loan. That means, bridge loan means from now till the time the funds are received from the lenders or the private equity. That's your mezzanine financing, or it is also known as bridge loan, and it is acquired temporarily in run up to the IPO, or run up to the extension of private equity in case of equity by the private equity fund, or a loan in case of a lender for the purpose of loan. Then you have a sixth stage of funding, and that is referred as leverage buyout. So assets of the acquired company are used as collateral for borrowing funds to finance the acquisition, and that is referred as leverage buyout. And then finally you have the stage of IPO, and that's where we all know as to what the companies do in respect of raising the equity through the process of IPO. So these friends are the stages of funding, generally speaking, in case of a startup. In my understanding and in my experience, it does not happen exactly as we have discussed. There may be some changes here, some changes there to suit the specific requirement, but broadly the pattern of funding in case of startup still remains the same.